Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Well, I would like to thank the leadership of MNLT and you for welcoming me back here once again. So, like I've said before, I've now come here so many times that I feel like it's family for me. And thank you for welcoming me and being a part of your family. So most of all, I want to thank the God of Israel, thank Yeshua for making this time possible because without him, you or I would not be here. And so the message that the God of Israel put upon my heart to share with you today is to give you some understanding of the days and times which we're living in and the prophetic timeline that I believe that he has shown me. So whenever I was 16 years of age, I was in Sunday school class, and that was the moment, I remember it vividly, that the God of Israel put upon my heart the thought that I would live to see in my lifetime the second coming of Yeshua. And when he gave me that overwhelming impression, that overwhelming thought, I didn't know anything about Bible prophecy, but I was real eager to want to learn, to want to understand, because if he was going to return in my lifetime, I wanted to know, what does the Bible say about Bible prophecy? What does it say about his second coming? And I wanted, as I was living my life, to be able to witness the events going on around me and get excited because the events that are going on around me, that the day is near and I would then be able to see his second coming. Now that is not something that most 16-year-olds think. And so, but that was the impression that came upon me. I know exactly where I was at. I was in a Sunday school class when that happened. And that fire that he put upon me then, and the desire to want to know about Bible prophecy over 40 years later, still remains with me. And so, at every opportunity I get, if someone's discussing a viewpoint of Bible prophecy, I want to listen and know what they're saying, why they're saying it, their thought rationale, their biblical proof of why they teach and say what they do. So that being the case, I've been able to hear of a whole lot of views about Bible prophecy and to learn and understand the thought process for those views. And I believe it's helped me in the process, at least to my satisfaction, to come to an understanding myself regarding what I believe and why I believe it. And so, in order for something to be biblically clean, one of the requirements is you got to chew the cud. In other words, it's not a one-time thing. You got to chew and then come back and chew again. So that's how it is with his word, understanding his word. That's how it is in understanding Bible prophecy. You got to come back and chew, and then when you think you're satisfied, you got to come back later and chew some more. So remember, in this walk and in this faith, it's not a one-time process. It is a process itself where you desire to go deeper, and as you desire to go deeper, God will show you more things. And so I get excited when I believe that I am learning new things. And just in the last few weeks, just in the last few months, something from my mind and my understanding has become clear to me that wasn't clear to me before. And because he's given me, I believe, that understanding, I get excited myself for it, and then I get excited that I want to share it. And so I'm here to share what I've recently come in my mind to have what I believe an understanding of, and that is the following. I want to share with you and show you how Matthew 24, that's when Yeshua was asked, what's the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? His answer in Matthew 24, which actually continues in Matthew 25, I'm going to show you how his answer parallels Revelation chapter 6. And what is Revelation chapter 6? Well, it begins by sharing what we commonly call the four horses of the apocalypse. But Revelation 6 contains the six seals. And then the last verse of Revelation 6 is a statement that we're now starting the day of the Lord. So I'm going to show you that parallel. And my reason for believing that parallel, and that in giving that parallel, Yeshua also stated, which is consistent now, I believe, with the book of Revelation, when is the greater exodus? When can we expect the greater exodus? So, because the congregation, thank God, is growing, keeps growing all the time, we got new people, and people are at different levels, different stages, different walks. Some people have been here 6 months, a year, 2 years. Some people, 5, 10 years or longer. And so in addition to teaching the Hebraic understanding of the Bible, one particular area that the Lord has gifted me in to teach and share is an understanding of the end of days. And now I've come to the understanding that Messiah's return is linked and associated with his role to end the exile of his people. And that is the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 37, 15 to 28. The two sticks, northern kingdom, southern kingdom Joseph, southern kingdom Judah, the two sticks becoming one. And so part of what I've done over the years is try to explain to people how that prophecy relates and pertains to you as a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah, because we're not taught that that prophecy relates and pertains to you in traditional Christianity. And so the things that I've learned over the years, I've not only taught, but now created and made DVDs. And I also have, for the materials that I've done, the DVDs, is a website that's got a systematic study of learning all these things, because the Great Commission is to make disciples of all nations. And so you have to sit, you have to be a student, you have to go over materials in order to make disciples. And actually the context is to make Torah disciples of Yeshua of all nations. And so therefore, what I hope to be able to get to here in this session in my time is to share with you some thoughts about why I believe that perhaps we have started the four horses of the apocalypse. Why, and that perhaps we have been the last 2 years in the white horse. And what, in this context, this perspective, what would be the white horse? It would be the coronavirus and the vaccine would be the white horse. And perhaps, if that is true, that we are starting the season of the red horse with the conflict in Ukraine, with Russia in Ukraine, that could be the start of the red horse. And so someone might be thinking, well, wait a second. I mean, what's happening now isn't so terrible if you compare it to, let's say, World War I, World War II, etc. And based upon where we're at now, that would be a valid thought. But you have to understand something about Bible prophecy. Bible prophecy gets fulfilled in part, but then it gets re-fulfilled again in its fullness. In other words, it's a cycle that keeps repeating itself. So would we be saying that the things described in the four horses, for example, and primarily, and here I want to share this with you, when the Bible describes in the Torah and the prophets the judgments that the God of Israel would bring upon his people. Usually it's these three words that are primarily used: famine, sword, and pestilence. Okay, so in order that you can follow along with me, because I haven't had time yet to make a formal presentation to help make this go smoother, hopefully our internet speed will be a little bit better, that I can share this with you on the screen in real time. But alternatively, while we're waiting, for example, in Jeremiah, in chapter 24, in verse 10, it says, "And I will send the sword, the famine, and the pestilence among them, till they be consumed from off the land that I give unto them and to their fathers." So we can find other verses that's going to repeat those things. But in addition, in Leviticus, in chapter 26 and verse 22, as it relates to the judgments, it says, "And I will send wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children and destroy your cattle, and make you few in number, and your way shall be desolate." So the judgments in the Torah for breaking the covenant that is repeated in the prophets is famine, sword, pestilence, wild beasts. Okay, so now if we go to Revelation in chapter 6 and look, for example, in Revelation chapter 6, we're going to look at the language of the pale horse. And so then if we turn to it, Revelation chapter 6 and verses 7 and 8, it says, "And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger," famine, "with death, and with the beasts of the earth." So these items there are mentioned. So Revelation 6 isn't new judgments, isn't new items. It's the way that the God of Israel has been judging his people for disobedience over a long period of time. So then what I want to do is let's begin by going to Matthew in chapter 24. And in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, okay, it reads as follows. "And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives," first of all, the setting here is the Mount of Olives. So there's a meaning actually as to why this is taking place on the Mount of Olives. Because in the Targums, the Aramaic paraphrases of the scripture, that the Mount of Olives is called the mountain of the Messiah. Okay? And so this takes place on the Mount of Olives. And in here, I believe this is the King James Version, it says, "When he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming?" And the King James says, "the end of the world." So if I read this with human logic, human thinking, and I read the phrase, "end of the world," what's the impression that comes to your mind? Exactly what it says. The world's going to come to an end. It's going to, now, end of the world, you think it's going to cease to exist. Okay? But that's how you read it if you don't have a Torah background. Okay? Or if you don't have a background of the Torah and the prophets and what they say and what would be the expectations of the Messiah. And so a fundamental understanding of the Messiah and the role of Messiah, particularly King Messiah, that religious Jews have, that Orthodox Jews have, that's not even in the thought process of most Christians, is that a major role of King Messiah is to end the exile of the 12 tribes of Israel. That is a major function and role and purpose of King Messiah. It's not the only role or function that King Messiah has, but it is a major one. All right? And so, that being the case, now if I'm reading this from a Torah perspective, a Hebraic understanding, what is the question that the disciples are asking that they would be interested in as well? And what really would be the meaning of the phrase in the question, the end of the world? Are they actually asking, do they really want to know when the world's going to be blown up and cease to exist? Is that really what they want to know? I don't think so. What do they want to know? They want to know, when is the end of the exile? Because the end of the exile is synonymous with the coming of the Messiah, King Messiah, ruling and reigning, and Israel being restored, and the Torah being taught to all nations, and Israel being the head of all nations. Okay, that's what they're looking for. The Messiah ruling and reigning over his people, teaching the Torah, and Israel being the head of all nations and not being subjugated by the nations. That's what they're interested in knowing, and that's what Orthodox Jews are interested in knowing today. Okay, so really what they're asking him is not when the world is going to end, when the world is going to blow up. What they're really asking him is, what are the signs that we're going to be coming to the end of the exile? And the signs then that we will no longer be in exile, the signs that we're going to enter into and be a part of the Messianic era. And actually what they ask him, if you read the question carefully, it says, what shall be the sign of your coming? How many signs did they ask him for? They only asked him for one. So they ask him one sign of the end of the exile. What do we look for? Now, most of you should be somewhat familiar with Matthew 24 and his answer. So you may not have every verse memorized, but the general idea of what he said and how he answered the question you're going to have. So that being the case, how did Yeshua answer the question? He actually gave them many signs of the sign, is how he answered the question. He didn't just say, this is the sign right there, and okay, I'm done. He gave them signs that precede the sign. And what is going to be the sign in the signs are signs of the end of the exile. Okay, so what I just said right now and what I just stated is not going to be how traditional Christianity reads the answer. They're going to read it in a more generic way. Oh, that Messiah's coming. In just the generic sense, without the particular detail that he's coming to end the exile. And that detail that they miss is very important. Because they are not really knowing the context by which he is returning. So what I want to do here is I want to give to you a parallel construct, lay out for you a parallel construct of how he answered the question. And the parallel construct is going to be, now first we need to know what the 6 seals are in Revelation, okay? So, Revelation chapter 6, verse 2. The first seal is the white horse. So let me read the verse, Revelation 6:2. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Now, let me show you how this is, at least in my life, in Bible prophecy being taught in traditional Christianity, how this has been taught and how and why it's been taught this way. You see, in Revelation chapter 19, when Yeshua is returning from the marriage supper to set his feet down on the Mount of Olives, he's riding on a white horse. And when he's riding on a white horse, it says he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Though the white horse represents being triumphant in military victory, triumphant in war. You've conquered your enemy. That's a white horse. But here, those white horse, Revelation 6:2, is not Yeshua. And so this is historically, given they see that's not Yeshua, and this is how and why it's been seen that this white horse is the Antichrist. And the coming of the Antichrist, because he's the false of what in Revelation 19 is the true. And so they see the white horse as the arrival of the Antichrist and him beginning doing things. And as they traditionally teach it, that is in evangelical Christianity, they commonly teach that the Antichrist signs a 7-year peace agreement with Israel. And the first 3.5 years is a pseudo-peace, that in the middle of the 3.5 years the peace gets broken. And in part how the peace gets broken is through these seals and the prophecies regarding these seals. That is how it's traditionally understood. But let me share with you basically the concept behind how they're trying to interpret it. They're trying to interpret that the white horse is associated with something false. It's associated with something deceitful, okay? So they at least got the principle, false and deceitful, all right? So that's what I want to associate the white horse with. And then we have the second seal, Revelation 6:3, and the second seal is the red horse. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. So now if I'm going to take this back to the Torah, what primarily does the Torah associate with the word red? It associates it with Esau in Genesis chapter 25, okay? Genesis chapter 25, and speaking about the birth of Esau, it says in Genesis 25:25, and the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau, and alternatively Edom. Okay, and the root of the word in Hebrew, you'd say Edom. The D and the M is the Hebrew word for blood, and blood is red. Okay, so red, this is going to be a hint of blood, which is going to be war, but it's also going to be a hint of Esau. And so what I believe the red horse is what we would call World War III. And the red, I believe, is going to be a connection to Russia and China, because historically communism is associated with red, and you have red China and red Russia. And so I think the connection of the red seal is World War III, Russia, and China. And now you have in Revelation 6:5, the third seal, and the third beast say, come and see it, and beheld, and a black horse, and he that sat upon him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. I believe it's describing inflation. And see now that you hurt not the oil and the wine. So what's being fought over? I went over this earlier. In Ukraine, one fundamental issue that's being fought over is energy, oil and natural gas, because Russia is dominant on oil and natural gas in Europe, gets a large percentage of its natural gas from Russia. And so the conflict in part, not in full, in part is connected with that. So hurt not the oil and the wine. The wine is going to be, wine in the Bible is associated with harvest. Harvest is associated with the economy. And so this is going to be associated with the economy. Black horse, this is going to be associated with the collapse of the economy. And so what has started now that we haven't seen in 40 years, at least not as we have it now, this past year, is inflation is now starting its process. So war, oftentimes, most of the time, leads to economic problems, economic disruptions, economic collapse. And then we read earlier the pale horse. And so now we have Revelation chapter 6, 7, and 8. He opened the fourth seal, and I heard the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat upon it was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given over a fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and with beasts of the earth. So the red horse is doing that, was given a great sword, but the pale horse, well, when you have war, when you have economic collapse, you have the combination of famine, pestilence, and you also have war, famine, pestilence. You have economic collapse. It's associated. So the fourth seal is the combination of the famine and war and the diseases and all the death that is associated with that combination. All right? So then you have the fifth seal, and the fifth seal is the persecution of and the killing of the saints of God. And when you open the fifth seal, I saw after the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not judge and avenge the blood of them that dwell on the earth?" And while robes was given unto every one of them, and it was said that they should rest yet for a little while until their fellow servants also and their brethren that they should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. And I beheld when he had, okay, that's the fifth seal, is persecution and death, martyrs, believers in Yeshua. Now you have the sixth seal, okay? And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth. The moon became as blood. I want you to notice that phraseology. And if this will come up better for me, we want to get another tab here. And it came up fast. So now I want to go to Joel chapter 2 and verse 10. Okay, in Joel chapter 2 and verse 10, it says, "And the earth shall quake before them. The heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining." And so I believe Joel chapter 2, verse 10 is language of the sixth seal. And so what is the context here of Joel chapter 2? In Joel chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. For the day of the Lord comes, it is near at hand." Okay, so there's a warning being given regarding the start of the day of the Lord. And in Joel chapter 2, verse 1 says, it's coming, It's near, but it's not here yet. And so now in describing what's happened, as the day of the Lord is coming, it describes this army. Now, who would be this army? And what I'm about to share you is not commonly taught or seen or understood. But in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, it says, I will remove from you the northern army and drive him into a land barren and desolate. So there's an army that's attacking in Joel chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. And that army, we're being told in Joel 2:20, is a northern army that's going to be driven back, that's going to be defeated. So you know who I think this is? When I link it with Ezekiel 39, it's Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog is the northern army that's going to invade Israel, that's going to be defeated, that's going to be driven back. And therefore, Gog Magog is associated with Joel chapter 2, verse 10, which is the language associated with the sixth seal. So I believe Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 39, is the sixth seal. Now, I also want to look here at Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10. So notice Joel 2, we're being told, the day of the Lord's coming. It is near. And then we're told about this army. In Isaiah 13, verse 10, look, it says, the stars of heaven and the constellations shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. The same language as Joel 2:10. The same language as Revelation 6:12. So I believe that Isaiah 13:10 is also the sixth seal. Now if we go back in Isaiah 13, and we go to verse 6, the day of the Lord is at hand. At hand. That's the same language. That's the same language, the day of the Lord's at hand, as Joel 2:1. Same language. So Isaiah 13 is parallel to Joel 2. Same language. Isaiah 13 is saying the day of the Lord is coming, but it's not here yet. Joel 2 is saying the day of the Lord's coming. It's not here yet. But Isaiah chapter 13 is a military attack against an entity called Babylon, or specifically the daughter of Babylon, which I don't have time to go into at this point in time, but I believe this is a reference to, Isaiah 13 is a reference to a military attack upon the United States of America. And so the sixth seal, I believe, is Gog Magog. It is a simultaneous military attack against Israel and the United States. Not the red horse, the sixth seal. And you remember a principle of the Torah is I'm going to make a distinction between my people in Goshen and the rest of Egypt. That's a prophecy. Biblical history is prophecy, to make a distinction. So in the greater Exodus, he's going to make a distinction as well. Who's he going to make a distinction between? Israel and the United States. Because he's going to miraculously intervene when Israel fasts and prays and cries out for the Messiah from the Gog Magog in the dire situation. They're going to cry out for the Messiah, and God is going to miraculously intervene and drive back the Gog Magog armies in Israel. But the attack upon the United States is going to ultimately result in the United States never recovering. And it will amaze the world. How can Israel survive in the United States, in our days, the greatest military country in our generation? How would it not survive, but little tiny old Israel survive? And so it's going to play out so that the God of Israel would receive glory from these things. Now, remember Yeshua said in Matthew 24, men's heart will fail them for the fear of the things coming upon the earth. He's making a reference to Isaiah 13:7. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. He's making a reference to the sixth seal. He's making a reference to Isaiah 13:17. He's making a reference to this military attack upon the United States of America. And they shall be afraid. Pains and sorrows shall take hold upon them. They shall be as a pain as a woman that travails. And they shall be amazed one another. Their faces shall be as flames. You know what that means? That means they'll be so shocked that they just absolutely cannot believe that it's happened. They'll just be without words. They're so shocked. And the fear of it is like completely overwhelming about what's coming next. And so this is the sixth seal. Gog Magog, the sixth seal, simultaneous military attack upon Israel and the United States. But notice in Joel 2, Isaiah 13, in both cases it's telling you, but the day of the Lord is near. Hasn't arrived yet. So now let's go back to Revelation chapter 6. And after describing the sixth seal, there's another detail here. At the sixth seal, it says, the kings of the earth and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains, the mighty men and every bondman and every free man, they hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. Notice the kings of the earth, they are hiding in the dens or the caves of the rocks. Okay, if I take that back to Torah, what is that going to be associated with? Who hides in caves? Who lives in caves or rocks? Esau. He lived in cave dwellings. The historical, literal Esau, back in Genesis, lived in cave dwellings. So the kings of the earth is going to be a reference to Esau. And so the kings of the earth is a reference to Esau. And biblically speaking, it's Esau that's the driving force behind wanting to have one world government, one world currency. The kings of the earth, Esau. And now look what we have at the end of Revelation 6. For the great day of his wrath is come. In other words, it's now here. So what preceded, say, if you take out the phrase the day of his wrath, that's the negative part. So the great day of the Lord has arrived. So this is now not the day of the Lord is near. The day of the Lord is now, we're now going to start the day of the Lord. We're now going to start the day of the Lord. And so what precedes the start of the day of the Lord? What precedes it? The first six seals. So, because I believe that Messiah is going to come and end the exile, and we're a part of who he's going to end the exile of, we are Joseph. That's our name and being grafted into Messiah. He's going to end the exile of Joseph and Judah. And when is he going to end the exile? When is the time of the greater exodus? It coincides with the start of the day of the Lord. The greater exodus coincides with the start of the day of the Lord, that we otherwise would call the Great Tribulation. And so the day of the Lord, as I teach it, the day of the Lord begins with the 3.5 year period of what we call the Great Tribulation. That's the 3.5 years before Yeshua sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives. So we have the six seals that happen before the start of the day of the Lord, the six seals that happen before we start the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. And during the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation, two primary things are happening at the same time during the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. Messiah is taking his people back in the greater exodus. At that exact same time, outside of Messiah taking his people back in the greater exodus, at that exact same time is the setup and the implementation of one world government with one world currency and with the proclamation in that system that no one may buy or sell. So, what is your deliverance from that one world government, one world currency system that the God of Israel has provided for his people? What is his deliverance? To be a part of and to participate in the greater exodus and Messiah gathering his people back to the land. So that's why this message that Messiah is coming to gather, unite the 12 tribes of Israel, and you understanding how that prophecy relates and pertains to you is so important. Because it's the deliverance that he has for you. So what is your preparation for that? To return to the Torah, to see you need to keep the Sabbath and the festivals and the dietary laws, and to identify with the Torah, and identify that you're Israel, to identify with the prophet. That's your preparation so that you don't miss out. But the enemy does want you to miss out, so he's going to come against you keeping the Sabbath and the festivals and the dietary laws and following the Torah and understanding that you're Israel. He's going to oppose the thought that you're a part of Messiah coming together and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. He's going to try to keep you from all of that. Okay? So, here I just shared with you the 6 seals. The 6 seals precedes the start of the day of the Lord. Now I'm going to show you now some scripture that the start of the day of the Lord is the time of the greater Exodus. The start of the day of the Lord. So the announcement of the start of the day of the Lord is Revelation 6:17. So now as we start the day of the Lord, that's when we start the greater Exodus. So the greater Exodus is after the 6th seal. Now we have the greater Exodus. So now let's go to Ezekiel in chapter 34, beginning in verse 12. All right, in Ezekiel 34, verse 12, it says, "As a shepherd seeketh out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered, so will I seek out my sheep. I will deliver them out of all the places where they've been scattered." That's the exile. I will do that. When is he going to do it? He tells you exactly when he's going to do it, right there. In the cloudy and dark day. He's going to do it in the cloudy and dark day. That is a term for the day of the Lord. And so notice that it's a cloudy and dark day. That's when he's going to do it. Now let's go back to Joel chapter 2, verse 1. "Blow the trumpet in Zion, for the day of the Lord comes. It is near." That day is a day of darkness and gloominess. It's a day of clouds and thick darkness. And a cloudy and dark day. He's going to bring you back in the cloudy and dark day. The day of the Lord is a day of clouds and thick darkness. That's when he's going to bring you back, right here. In the cloudy and dark day. Okay, so now if we go to Hosea in chapter 6. "Come and let us return to the Lord." You know what returning to the Lord is? Come back to the Torah. "For he is torn, he is healed." Torn. That's the exile. He will heal us. That's the end of the exile. "He is smitten, he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us." So as we come to the end of 2 days, 2,000 years, he's going to revive us. What's the reviving? Returning to the Torah. Now, we have a name for that now. We call it the Messianic movement. We call it the Hebrew roots movement. That's the general name. Messianic Hebraic roots movement of returning to the Torah. So that's after 2 days. But it's in the third day. It's in the third day that he will raise us up. Raise us up. What's that? That's the end of the exile. Because in exile, you're like dry bones. Ezekiel 37, the dry bones. But the end of the exile, he raises you up. You're not dry bones anymore. He resurrects you. So when's he going to do it? In the third day. So the third day is an alternative name for the day of the Lord because we're counting from Yeshua's first coming. 2,000 years, 2 days, and then we have the last 1,000 years, which is the third day. And that's the day that he's going to bring you up, which is the cloudy and dark day, which is the day of the Lord. And on that day when he raises us up, on the same day that he raises us up, the same day that he ends the exile, is the same day that we will live in his sight. We'll see him. Why? Because he set his feet down on the Mount of Olives. Why? Because he's teaching the Torah from Jerusalem on that same day. How long is that day? 1,000 years. But the day begins in darkness. And the darkness we call the Great Tribulation. And it's during the Great Tribulation, the dark and cloudy day, that he gathers us. And so how do we know when that day starts? Well, we got 6 seals before it. But the last of the 6 seals of indicating of the day the Lord's going to start, he's going to gather the exiles of Israel, is the 6th seal, which is a simultaneous military attack against Israel and the United States. that the United States is not going to recover, but Israel will. But in Ezekiel 39, when it talks about the defeat of Gog and Magog, this is the declaration. This is now describing Gog and Magog's been defeated. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob. He's making a decree. He's declaring the exile is over. When is the decree that the exile is over? With the defeat of Gog and Magog. When's Gog and Magog? It's the sixth seal. Once the decree that the exile is over, Ezekiel 39:25, with that decree that the exile is over, we're now going to start the day of the Lord. And now we're going to start the greater Exodus. So what happens back after the sixth seal is over in Revelation chapter 6? What's the next thing that we're told? Revelation 7, as we're starting the day of the Lord, what's the next thing we're told? We're told about the sealing of the 144,000. When's the sealing of the 144,000? After the sixth seal. So we got the sealing of the 144,000, and it says that there were those, a great multitude, which no man can number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues. And so all these people, of all kindreds and nations and peoples and tongues, all these people, a question is asked about them. Who are they? Who are these that came out of Great Tribulation? The elders said, who are these that are arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And he said, they came out of Great Tribulation. Now that language I associate with that 3.5-year period. That Great Tribulation period, which I am saying that 3.5 years starts with the start of the day of the Lord, after the sixth seal. Now we have the Great Tribulation period, and now the question is asked, who are these people that came out of the Great Tribulation? Of all kindreds and nations and peoples and tongues. Like, who are they? Here's the answer of who they are. They shall hunger no more, they shall thirst no more. Neither shall the sun light upon them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall lead them. He will lead them into living fountains of water, and God will wipe away all tears from their eyes. This is who came out of Great Tribulation, right here. I'm going to read it slower because I want you to notice the language. They will hunger no more. They will thirst no more. Neither shall the sun light upon them, nor any heat. For the Lamb will lead them into living fountains of water. Look, the Lamb is leading them. He's going to wipe away all tears from their eyes. You know what wiping away all tears from their eyes means? It means the end of the exile. Because the exile was a time of weeping and mourning. Remember, Rachel's weeping for her children, refused to be comforted. And then she's being told, when your children come back to their border, she's not going to weep anymore. So weeping is exile. He'll wipe away all tears from their eyes means the end of the exile. And notice how we're going to end the exile. The Lamb is going to lead them. The Lamb is going to lead them. All right, and who are they? They will hunger no more, they will thirst no more, neither shall the sun light upon them, nor any heat. Okay, now let's go to Isaiah 49 and verse 10. Look what it says in Isaiah 49, verse 10. It says, they will not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that has mercy on them, which is said to be the Lamb in Revelation 7, he will lead them. And by springs of water shall he guide them. So look, this is who came out of Great Tribulation right there. Isaiah 49:10 are those that came out of Great Tribulation. How are the people in Isaiah 49:10 coming out of Great Tribulation? Who are they? Well, that you may say to the prisoners, go forth. Who are the prisoners? They're the exiles. They're the exiles regarded as a prison. So the exiles are in prison. They're told, okay, you're not in prison anymore. You can leave your prison. You can leave their exile. And that's what it says about them. These are they that came out of Great Tribulation. And so the greater Exodus is during the time of the Great Tribulation, during the start of the day of the Lord. which is the cloudy and dark day, which is the third day, which is after Gog Magog, which is after the sixth seal, because after the sixth seal, now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob and have mercy on the whole house of Israel. So you see that? So I haven't yet gone into it. I believe the white horse is the coronavirus and ultimately the vaccine. So let's go to that because my time is running down. So if we go to, let's see if I can click here. Is this Revelation 6? That's Matthew 24. All right, we'll go to Revelation 6 here. Okay. Revelation 6:2. All right, Revelation 6:2. This one verse about the white horse. White horse. Remember, white horse, we said, is about false. It's got the concept of deception. All right. And so he had a crown. Well, what does a crown represent? Rulership, reigning. Okay, crown. Okay, so now what I want to do here, we get another tab. I'm going to say, what is the Latin word for crown? Did I spell it right? There it is. There's crown. Here's the Latin word, corona. Whoa. The Latin word for crown is corona. So the virus is called coronavirus, crown virus, okay? So now we go back here, and it says that he had a bow, all right? A bow. Now, if I read that in English, I'm not going to really get what it's communicating here. So I want to get here, the white horse had a bow. Here's bow, here's the Greek word. The Greek word is toxin. Toxin. Toxin is where we get the word toxic. And when we say something's toxic, what are we alternately saying about something if it's toxic? It's poisonous. Okay, so the Greek word implies toxic, it implies poison. Okay, so now what I want to do here, so now notice, it's the Greek word toxin. Okay, so now what I want to do here, now I know all of you is going to be familiar with this, right? So what is the Oxford Dictionary 2018 Word of the Year? Now you guys all know that, right? What? The 2018 Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. Okay, Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. We click on it right here, okay? Here it is, the explanation of this 2018 Word of the Year. So it says, the adjective toxic is defined as poisonous, and it first appeared in English in the mid-17th century from the medieval Latin toxicus, meaning poison or imbued with poison. So we get the English word toxic from the Latin, but the word's deadly history doesn't start there. The medieval Latin term was borrowed from the Latin toxicon, meaning poison, which has its origins in the Greek toxicon. The origin of toxic is from Latin, comes from Greek toxicon, pharmakon. You know, pharmakon's where we have pharmacy. Toxicon, lethal poison, used by the ancient Greeks for smearing on the points of their arrows. So when you shoot your arrow, the end of the arrow would be something poisonous, so when you got hit by the arrow, you would be poisoned. Okay? Interestingly, it's not pharmakon, the word for poison, that made the leap into Latin here, but toxicon. Toxicon comes from the Greek word for bow, toxin. What's the Greek word in Revelation 6:2 for bow? Toxin. So toxicon comes from toxin, and toxicon back into the Latin, back into the English is toxic. In the meaning behind bow or toxin in the ancient Greek is smearing the point of an arrow. Now I can make the modern application today of the vaccine. The vaccine's got a needle and it's got a point, okay? And even though the liberals may not understand this, what is the core of why people are hesitant about getting the vaccine? What's their major complaint about it, that they say you shouldn't do it? They believe that we're not being told the truth about the quote-unquote vaccine. They're telling us, take it. It will keep you from getting coronavirus. It will keep you from spreading it, and it's safe and effective. Well, the people that don't want to get it says, well, wait a second, you're deceiving me. You're lying to me. It's not safe. It's not effective. And it's got stuff in it that's not good for me, that's harmful for me. So your fundamental complaint that people, why they don't want to get vaccinated, is if it was safe and effective, of course they would. It's common sense. Okay, who wants to get sick? Who wants to die? We don't want to get sick and die. It's common sense. If there's a vaccine, they'll keep us from dying. It's just common sense. So you can't, it's not rational to argue against something so fundamental as I don't want to die. And so what do you oppose about it? Well, it's deceitful. It's dishonest. It's not safe. It's not effective. It's not doing what you tell us to do. And so if you see that fundamentally, if you would agree with me, do you agree with me that that's basically the objection? Is there's a dishonesty and a deceit that people feel is behind it, not that they're against being healthy. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to click on this word, bow. Where's it at here? Bow, right here. All right. So I'm clicking on the Greek word, and I know what I want to do. I want to put in the word bow. I want to put in the word bow, and I want to see what it is in the Hebrew, okay? So here, Genesis, your bow. Here, it says Genesis 27:3. Take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out in the field, okay? So we're going to look at the Hebrew word for bow. Here, it's the Strong's number 7198. So it's the word cassette. Hebrew word cassette. 7198, cassette. All right, so now I'm going to click on that. And I believe it says it comes from this word. I think this is the right one. So we'll click on that. So look what the root of the Hebrew means. It means, let's see here. I can see it here on mine. Okay, so it means in the call stem there, to lay bait or lure, to lay a snare, to lure. So the Hebrew word for bow, the root meaning behind it is to lay, a lure, a snare. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to catch something. How? Deceitfully. So the Hebrew word for bow, the root meaning behind it, is deceit, to lay a trap, deceit. The Greek word has the meaning of being poisonous. So I'm going to put the Greek and the Hebrew together. Something poisonous that is deceitful, that those who are receiving it are being trapped into what? Believing it's safe and effective, but really it's not. So I believe that could describe the vaccine. So do you see where the thought process comes, how the coronavirus, corona in Latin, is associated with the shot, the vaccine, where in Greek it's something poisonous, but in Hebrew it's to deceive. And fundamentally, the white horse is translated as false, to deceive. Okay, so you see how the thought process is how it could be the white horse. And what's it's doing? It went forth conquering and to conquer. In other words, it's trying to rule over you. So how's the vaccine and the virus trying to roll over you? You have to wear a mask. If you want a job, you got to do this. If you want to participate in that event, you got to do that. It's trying to control and dominate your life. You see the application. So if we've been in the white horse, then we're going to look at the possibility that perhaps the battle between East and West in Ukraine, where Russia's involved there and the West is opposing, that could be the start of the red horse. Okay? So now we're going to go back to Matthew 24. Let's go back to Matthew 24, and I laid out to you Revelation 6, and let's see how Yeshua answers the question. So the first thing that he says when he answers the question is, don't let anyone deceive you. So we're going to map, don't be deceived with the white horse, which is false, to deceive. So he's making a connection now, don't be deceived, to the white horse. Then what does he say next? There'll be wars and rumors of wars. Well, that would be the red horse. The red horse was given a great sword and to take peace from the earth. Then he says, okay, don't be troubled. These things must come to pass. But the end of the exile is not yet. The end. He's describing the end of the exile. The end of the exile is not yet with the white horse and the red horse. Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There's going to be famines and pestilences. So famines and pestilences. Well, that's going to be the black horse and the pale horse. Because war, famine, pestilences are the main categories of judgments that God judges his people. So those are going to be the judgments of Revelation 6. And those things bring death. So now we have, here Yeshua's laid out the first four horses. Or at least he's hinted at them. And now look at these. He says, now after we get to the first four horses, these things are the beginning of sorrows. We haven't yet reached the end of the exile at the start of the day of the Lord, the greater exodus yet. So you know what this word sorrows is? You know what this word sorrows is? Okay. These things are the beginning of sorrows. It's the Greek word odin. You know what the word means? It means birth pains. A pain of childbirth, travail, pain, birth pain. These are the beginnings of birth pains. Okay? So now we got to the first four seals, and we're only at the beginning of the birth pains. Okay, so the question is, if there's a birth pain, something is being born. Okay, who or what is being born? Ultimately, what's being born is the end of the exile. In the beginning of the greater. So in order for me to get to the end of the exile, that comes by a birthing process. So what's going to be the alternative name for the one that's giving birth? Zion. Because one of the meanings of Zion in Hebrew, one of the meanings of Zion is equivalent to the end of the exile. Zion is equivalent to the end of the exile. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3, I believe it's verse 12. It says, go and proclaim these words to the north and say, return, O backsliding Israel, says the Lord, I will not cause my anger to fall upon you. I will not keep anger forever. Verse 14, turn, O backsliding children, for I am married to you. I am married. I will take you one of a city, two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. So I'm going to bring you to Zion. Zion is the end of the exile. That's the uniting of northern kingdom, southern kingdom. Okay, so now I'm going to bring you to Zion. All right. So if we look at Zion. On the city, I'm married to you. I will bring you to Zion. Zion is 6726, okay? 6726, Zion. 4 letters. Zadi, Yod, Vav, Nun. 4 letters. Zadi, Yod, Vav, Nun. Zion, Strong's number 6726. Okay? So now we're going to go to Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15. Here, Rachel was weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted. She's weeping. Remember? Who are these that came out of Great Tribulation? He's going to wipe away tears from her eyes. Rachel's weeping. But then she's told to stop weeping. Why? Because your children will come from the land of the enemy. There's hope that your children will come again to their own border. So when Rachel's children are no longer in exile, when they return to the land of Israel, you can stop your weeping now. Exile is weeping. End of the exile is no more weeping. So who's this specifically talking about? I've heard Ephraim bemoaning himself because Rachel has Joseph. Joseph has Ephraim. This is about Ephraim, okay? That Ephraim's going to return to the land, all right? So now we got in verse 21, Jeremiah 31:20. Set you up waymarks. You see this word waymarks? Set you up waymarks. Let's look to see what that word is. Set you up waymarks. Waymarks. Remember what Zion was? It was 6726. Waymarks is 6725. So what is waymarks? Zadi, Yod, Vav, Nun. The exact same letters as Zion. Waymarks. So what does this is pronounced Zion instead of Zion. So what does this word mean? It means a signpost, a monument. It means a sign, a waymark. It means a pillar. Look, a guiding pillar. Zion, a guiding pillar. What's the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night? It's a guiding pillar. Zion, a guiding pillar. And so if you're looking for Zion, you're looking for the guiding pillar. You're looking for the sign. Okay? Zion is the end of the exile. So now we look at Revelation chapter 12. Are you following me? Okay, Revelation chapter 12, it says this. There appeared a great wonder in heaven. You know what that word wonder is? It's a Greek word for sign. There appeared a great wonder in heaven. It's the Greek word for sign. Look, a sign. There appeared a great sign in heaven. Now, how would I say that in Hebrew? Zion. Or I can say linguistically, Zion. Okay? So what we're being told here is, okay. We have a Zion in heaven, a sign. And the sign is a woman with a crown of 12 stars. Why 12 stars? That's the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is a sign of the crown, Israel, crown, ruling and reigning, 12 stars, the 12 tribes united. This is a sign of the end of the exile in Israel ruling and reigning, which happens when? Once Messiah returns. However, this process, in order for Israel to rule and for the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, which is Zion, in order for this to happen, it has to go through a birth process. She's travailing in birth and she's in pain to be delivered. Now look, a part of the birth is she brought forth a man-child. So she brings forth a man-child who is to rule all nations. Who's that? The Messiah. He's the male child that's going to rule all nations. All right, so from the birth of Zion somehow comes the Messiah. Okay, so now let's go to Isaiah 66. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 7. So you ready for this? It says, before she travailed, before her pain come, she was delivered with child. How many of you women have had a child and the pain came from your child after it was born? No, the big pain. Yeah, I know they can be a pain, but we're talking about. Okay, but the pain comes in the delivering of the child. But this says the pain came after. And who's having the pain? Zion. The pain is coming to Zion. So Zion delivers a male child in verse 7. See, she was delivered a male child. Zion birthed a male child. After Zion birthed the male child, then her pain came. What's that a reference to? The first coming. Yeshua came, and when was the pain? The destruction of the temple and of Jerusalem, and the Jews being in exile. That pain came after Messiah came. So he came first, Zion delivered Messiah, and then the pain came afterward. So this is first coming, all right? But now we have next verse. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such thing? Shall the earth to be made to bring forth in one day? Shall a nation be born at once? As soon as she travailed. As soon as she travailed. Oh, that makes sense now. As soon as she travailed, she brought forth her children. Yeshua said, well, after the first 4 seals is the beginning of sorrows. You know what the ultimate travail was? I read it to you in Isaiah 13. You know what the ultimate travail of bringing forth the child is? Gog and Magog. That's the ultimate travail. So look, it says, shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth? Shall I cause to bring forth and shut up the womb? Why is the question being asked for? Because that's what's going to look like. When Gog and Magog initially invades Israel, it looks like that's it. Israel's no longer going to be a country. The Jews are going to be wiped off the map. And he says, wait a second, have I brought to this point and not allowed Zion to be born? To not end the exile? And then he says, rejoice in Jerusalem. Be glad with her, all that love her. And now look what he says now, when she gives birth. It says, when you see this, see what? The birth of Zion. Your heart will rejoice. Your bones will flourish like an herb. And the hand of the Lord will be known to his servants and his indignation toward his enemies. That's the time of his great wrath. So what's the hand of the Lord known to his servants? What's the hand known to his servants? What Zion's born? What's the hand? That's the greater Exodus. That he takes you back by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Signs, wonders, miracles. It's glorious. But to the world, it's being judged. It's his indignation toward his enemies. So we have the 6 seals, the start of the day of the Lord, the start of the greater Exodus. There was a parallel of the greater Exodus with the 42 months that the beast is ruling, one world government, one world currency. Okay, now Yeshua says, back to Matthew chapter 24, that these things are just the beginning of sorrows after we have the first 4 seals. So we go to back to Matthew 24. Uh-oh. Hey, do you guys like bonus? Overtime? Okay, so now we have the first 4 seals. And now what happens after he says these are the beginnings of sorrows? Now you know what that means. That's Zion being born, the end of the exile. Okay? And so you'll be delivered and afflicted. They will kill you. You'll be hated. What's that? That's the 5th seal. That's the persecution. That's the 5th seal. Now he goes on, and now look what he says here as he concludes the chapter. Now we don't have time to do this, but you see that word after? That's an interpretation. I did a click on the Greek going back to the Hebrew, and you know how that word in the Greek, if I take it back to the Hebrew, I don't have time to do it now because we've run out of time. That word can be translated alongside or at the same time, okay? Trust me on that one. You can go look that up yourself. So at the same time of the tribulation of those days, shall the sun be darkened, the moon will not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. What is that? That's the language of the 6th seal. That's Joel 2:10. That's Isaiah 13:10. That's Gog and Magog. What do we know at the end of Gog and Magog, the exile is declared over. And so now look what he says. Now after the sixth seal, then will be the sign. Now we're going to have the sign. Remember they asked for the sign? It comes after the sixth seal. So what is the sign? The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Sign, Zion. Sign, Zion. The guiding pillar. Now we get the sign. Messiah is now returning the exiles back to the land, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And so it says, and there he will send his angels. Now you're going to think of angels, angels, Gabriel, Michael. But the Hebrew word is messenger. He's going to send his messengers. Who's going to be the messengers? The 144,000. He will send his messengers. Now look, with the great sound of the trumpet, and they will gather together the elect from the four winds. Look, this is the greater Exodus. That's the greater Exodus. When's the greater Exodus? It's after the sixth seal. When he gives now the sign, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Now this is the Exodus, which is during the Great Tribulation. So I'm going to show you this phrase. See, gathering his elect is with the great sound of the trumpet. You see that? The great sound of the trumpet. Now we're going to go to Isaiah chapter 27, verse 13. Isaiah 27, verse 13. There shall be, it will come to pass in that day. What day? The day of the Lord. So this happens in the day of the Lord. That the great trumpet will be blown. That's what Yeshua said. The sound of the great shofar. And they will come that were ready from the land, that were ready to perish in the land of Assyria and the outcasts from the land of Egypt. And they will worship the Lord in the holy mount of Jerusalem. Look, that's the greater Exodus. All right, great sound of the shofar. So now, here's what we did. So Yeshua, okay, he was asked the question, when's the end of the exile and what's the sign of the end of the exile? His answer is there's going to be 6 seals. The 6th seal is Gog and Magog. And he parallels that with Revelation chapter 6 seals. After the 6 seals, we have the start of the day of the Lord. As we start the day of the Lord begins in darkness, the Great Tribulation. So during the first 3.5 years of the day of the Lord, the first 3.5 years of the 1,000 years, that's when the greater Exodus is. And with the start of the day of the Lord is the sign. And so when do we start the greater Exodus? After the 6th seal. When? It's at the Passover. After the 6th seal. After the exile is declared over. It's at the Passover. Passover is the time of the Exodus. So it's at the Exodus. Messiah takes his people back in the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Signs, wonders, miracles. Signs, wonders, miracles. While on the earth, we have one world government and we have the mark of the beast. So his deliverance is be prepared for the coming Messiah and him returning his people back to the land, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So this message about be prepared for the Messiah and know that you're Israel, that you return to the Torah, that's a preparation for Messiah's coming to gather the exiles of Israel. This is a very important message for this generation. It's not the flavor of the month that we go on next month to another flavor. Okay? So this is a very important message as it relates to the bride of Yeshua being prepared for his return and being prepared for his second coming. So I pray that message has been a blessing to you, but I got one final detail and I'm done. Okay, one final detail. And that is back to Ezekiel chapter 39. This is to end with encouragement, okay? Ezekiel chapter 39. We're going to begin in verse 25, where he declared the exile over, okay? Ezekiel 39:25. Here, now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob. He declares the end of the exile. But in bringing his people back to the land, look what it says. They will know that I am the Lord their God, which caused them to be led into captivity among the nations. I've gathered them from their own land, and it says, neither will I hide my face any more from them. Look at this. I have poured out my Spirit upon the house of Israel. The greater Exodus coincides with I have poured out my Spirit upon the house of Israel. This is going to be the greatest outpouring of the Holy Spirit that the world has ever seen. So now let's go back to Joel 2, and this is where we end. Joel 2. Remember Joel 2, verse 20? Where it says, I'm going to remove from you the northern army. And now if we go on, and it says, you will eat in plenty and be satisfied and praise the name of the Lord. My people will never be ashamed. That's the language of no more exile. And you will know that I am in the midst of Israel, and my people will never be ashamed. No more exile. And now look at this. And it will come to pass afterward. After what? After the northern army is driven back. It will come to pass after Gog and Magog. It will come to pass after the sixth seal, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Young men shall see dreams. So the greatest outpouring of the Holy Spirit, dreams, visions, miracles, signs, wonders, that far exceeds what happened in Egypt, is going to happen after the sixth seal, once the woman gives birth. And so when you're in the river, man, that's the river that you want to be in, okay? Upon my servants and my handmaidens will I pull out my Spirit. And look, I will show wonders in the heavens of the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Look, that's the sixth seal. The sixth seal before we start the great and terrible day of the Lord, Revelation 6:17. But once we start that, now we have the greatest outpouring of His Holy Spirit to bring the exiles back to the land. So there's a lot of pain, but there's a lot of joy at the end. So we look at the joy in enduring the pain, and Messiah has a deliverance program. We just need to identify with it. It's called the Greater Exodus. So I pray the message has been a blessing to you, and this will help you to understand the timing and the details of the coming of the Messiah, and how the six seals precedes the Greater Exodus, how Matthew 24 is a parallel of Revelation 6. Yeshua answers in Matthew 24 the six seals, and then he tells you about the Greater Exodus. Now, Matthew 25, 1-10, he tells you a parable about the Greater Exodus. Anyhow, he wants you to be prepared. He wants you to know what you're supposed to do. He said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because he's already told you, if you believe him, what the outcome is, and it's glorious and it's great. He's going to return. You get to rule and reign with him, and the world's going to go on. It's not going to end. We're just changing ages.